Okay, welcome again. My name is Andy from Daily Philosophy, and today we are trying out a program called Jasper. Jasper.ai is the domain, and this thing produces text. It can write articles, it can write blog posts, it can write presumably also term papers. As philosophers, we're interested in what this thing can do and how well it works. So this is what we will try out today. Here I already started to have something to show you. What you do essentially when you start Jasper and then you say you want to write a long form article, you drop into this editor where on the left side you can say what your title is. And you can also just get recommendations for titles if you want, if you don't know about which title you want. Then here you have a content description or a brief, and this you can change from paragraph to paragraph, and you should change it to avoid the program creating the same text again and again. You can select a tone of voice, which I have now not done, and some keywords, and say how much output you want. And then on the right side it will create this content that you see here. So this is all machine generated. I have not done anything much. I've not done anything to it, but I have guided its creation. So the thing is, you create this content by guiding the program to write the right kind of content. Okay, let's try this example now once again, just to make sure that you can see how it works. So what I would do, here I can enter, for example, here I can enter commands to Jasper, and the commands usually begin with this thing, and then you say write 5 titles on why humanities matter in today's world. So that's a command, and by pressing Ctrl Enter I can execute the command, and then I get these 5 titles. It stops here because it doesn't, you're charged by the word, so it doesn't want to produce thousands and thousands of words because this is essentially your money, right? So it wants, if you want to continue, you have to press Ctrl and J, and then it continues. Okay, so here we are. The importance of humanities in a rapidly changing world. The role of humanities in bridging the gap between cultures. So, see, I have not done anything more than just telling him this. So now, how the humanities empower individuals to make a difference in the world. This seems a little vague. The importance of humanities in a rapidly changing world. This sounds good. So I will copy this into this here, the title. And now it wants a description or a brief. But you can also make the program write that. So write a brief on the importance of humanities in a rapidly changing world. And now let's again execute this. Write an article about how the humanities are more important than ever in a rapidly changing world. With technology and machines taking over many jobs, the humanities help us maintain our sense of humanity and connection to the world around us. They allow us to explore different cultures, understand different perspectives, and connect with people from all walks of life. Okay, we want to add a little bit here. I want to get a little more into the practical use of humanities. Also explain why humanities are more valuable than STEM subjects. Okay, we want to make it a little more concrete. So now I copy this brief into here. Now we can select the tone of voice. Let's try witty. I've never tried the witty version. And now we can create an outline. for a blog post on why humanities are important for today's students. Now when I execute this, it will take whatever is here in my command, this here, but it will also take whatever is on the left in these boxes here, what I wrote before. So all these things will be taken into account to generate the content. So let's try this. So here is an outline, and it stops again, so I have to press Ctrl and J to continue. Okay, introduce the topic of the humanities and why they are important. Discuss how technology is changing the world and how the humanities help us stay connected. Explain why the humanities are more valuable than STEM subjects. Summarize the benefits and offer tips for parents on how to encourage their children to study the humanities. So you see, this is already a great outline. It's not bad, really. So let's try this. Introduce the topic of humanities and why they are important. So now I will copy this down here and say this is a heading by clicking over here. And now this stops in the middle of the sentence here again. Let's press Ctrl J to continue it. Okay, the humanities are more important than ever in a rapidly changing world. With technology and machines taking over many jobs, the humanities help us maintain our sense of humanity and connection to the world around us. Okay, this is more or less what was here already, right? So he's just copying that. Now, if I want to improve that, I need to give him a little more. Let's say here we talk about the STEM subjects, and now we continue from here, and I also need to change this a little to, by changing this you guide what comes next. So we want to change this a little and say why, talk about why STEM subjects alone are not enough for today's employees. Let's try this. And now let's continue here. So the second paragraph is also a little bit of fluff here, but let's continue. The benefits are numerous. They include developing critical thinking, gaining a better understanding, and becoming more empathetic and open-minded. And now comes the parents. The parents can encourage the children to study humanities. So you get some idea of how this works and how you could produce some kind of text. Now if you read this text, you saw the text, if you read this text, so you see that this is a little superficial, it's a lot of filler, it's not very very concrete or very argumentative. So let's make another example. Let's create another example and try to write something that would be more like a student paper that they might submit to us. Okay, and here we are now. I can create a blog post. Let's create a blog post or a student paper, essentially could be something like a blog post. They don't advertise this for student papers, obviously. But let's try to create one about Kant's ethics. Write a brief for Kant's ethics. And now let's try what will come out of that. Particular focus on the categorical imperative. Okay, this is not, it is already good that the program understood that we want the categorical imperative, but let's make it a little more precise. The two forms of the categorical imperative and the issue of treating human beings as ends and as means only. So let's try what would happen if we do this. Now write some block title ideas. Let's see what we will come up with. Kant's ethics, the categorical imperative, the two forms of the categorical imperative, treating human being as ends and as means only. I will go for the first one here. It's a little boring perhaps, but why not? So write an introduction. Let's go. Kant's ethical theory, it says, is based on the categorical imperative, a moral principle that dictates what actions are right and wrong. The categorical imperative can be broken down to two forms: the universalizability principle and the humanity formula. This is great. This is surprisingly good. I didn't expect this. The universalizability principle states that an action is only morally permissible if it can be universalized, or if it can be applied to everyone without leading to contradiction. The humanity formula states that an action is only morally permissible if it treats human beings as ends in themselves and not as means to an end. This means we should never use others as means to our own ends, but rather respect their autonomy and dignity. So now here we could add, some clarification. Of course, sometimes, it is inevitable that we treat others as means, but then we must also treat them as ends. The categorical imperative is a powerful moral principle, but it is not without its criticism. Some argue that it is too abstract and doesn't take into account the complexities of real-life situations. Others argue that it does not provide enough guidance on how to act in difficult situations. Nonetheless, Kant's ethics remains an influential theory of right and wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. And if I wanted an outline for this topic, let's also produce an outline now. What is Kant's categorical imperative? Criticisms, how Kant's ethics can be applied in the real world, final thoughts on Kant's ethics. So, write about. Let's bring this up here and declare this to be a heading. Okay, and now we go more into the universalizability principle, which I want also to declare to be an H2, a heading. And now I can tell him to write about the oh, come on, I'm not typing this. Okay, now let's start. Okay, and now he wrote a brilliant paragraph there for, an introductory course in ethics. This would be just great for a term paper. It is well written, it's interesting, it has a plausible example. And now it immediately launched into the next thing, the humanity formula. So let's also continue here. The humanity formula is based on the belief that human beings should be treated as ends. And again, an example. With a kidney transplant. And now he wants to launch into the conclusion. We don't want this yet. We want to go into the criticisms. This thing doesn't like me. Anyway, it has some way of messing with the numbering. I cannot enter a number and then a space without it reverting to 1. Okay, anyway, I think we are okay. Criticisms of Kant's categorical imperative. So right about, and then perhaps I can just copy the whole thing here. And make sure it's not an H2. So it has some little things that don't work as expected, but that's normal in all kinds of these interfaces. Even Google Docs has its own craziness sometimes. So there is a number of criticisms that can be made. One of the most common criticisms is that it's difficult to apply in certain situations. For example, can be difficult to apply in cases where there are multiple possible actions, all of which could be universalized. It can also be difficult to apply where it would lead to contradiction. In addition, the humanity formula can be difficult to apply in cases where treating someone as an entity themselves would conflict with other moral principles, such as the principle of self-defense. Another common criticism is that it's too idealistic. This is because it assumes that everyone would be willing to universalize their actions and that everyone would treat others as ends in themselves. However, in reality, there are many people who do not act in accordance with these principles. For example, there are people who would not hesitate to hit a child with a car if it meant that they could save their own life. In addition, there are people who routinely use others as means to their own ends without any regard for their autonomy or dignity. Now, you see that here he refers to the child example that he used previously. So there is really a lot of what you don't expect, coherence in the whole thing, and thoughts, that continue over paragraphs. Finally, some critics argue it's too divorced from human emotions and practical concerns. Excellent. This is because it focuses on abstract principles rather than on the concrete reality of human life. For example, the universalizability principle does not take into account the fact that some actions may have different consequences for different people. In addition, the humanity formula does not take into account the fact that some people may be more deserving of respect and consideration than others. Despite these criticisms, so you see that there is a bit of repetition. We saw this sentence here before, right? A powerful framework for thinking about morality and principles continue to be relevant in modern times. You have to check, what the thing is saying and whether it makes sense and whether it repeats it. It tends to repeat itself. So, final thoughts on Kant's ethics. Now here it says 6. Here we missed the number 4, and this should be 5. So we will correct all these later because we just copied out of this editor into another, into a Google document or something, and then we can do it. Write 2 paragraphs on final thoughts on Kant's ethics. Perhaps we say about, to not have on and on again in case this confuses its grammar parsing. So here we are. In Kant's ethics, the categorical imperative provides a framework for thinking about morality in a principled way. It is based on the belief that human beings should be treated as ends in themselves and that we should always act in accordance with our principles. While there are some criticisms, they remain influential in modern times. Okay, so that's it. It needs a little cleaning up, the headers and the numberings. It needs perhaps the final thoughts is a little thin and would need a little bit of expanding. But you see that in the end this whole thing works great. It needs some cleaning up, it needs some editing, but it is able to write an understandable, a correct, rich article about Kant's ethics with minimal guidance. The program is as it comes out of the box. You see, the only thing I entered was these things on the left side and these commands I put into the text. And that's all. And it works. It works great. There's nothing really to complain about. This can be used to produce within, how long did it take us now? 10 minutes, 15? Within, a quarter of an hour, you can produce a short article on Kant's ethics. And I will put this and this article up on Daily Philosophy. And then, one thing to be aware of is that your students can actually do this. Your students can use this tool to write papers, and we should really, as teachers, be aware that AI is that good. And you are not safe from submissions like this, and you are not going to recognize that this was written by an AI tool, especially if you have students that that are in the first year, that are young students who don't have a lot of background, and they produce something like this in an introductory course. This is perfectly fine, right, for a short paper. And you must be aware that this can be completely machine generated. I don't know how to counter that. Perhaps just don't give this kind of homework anymore. Make the students write these things in class. In an exam situation, this would be one solution. Handwritten essays that people have to write in the presence of the instructor to avoid that they can use these tools. As soon as you give them homework, they can produce this within 15 minutes and then tweak it a little and add a little, and then you have a problem. Okay, so thank you, see you next time, and don't forget to subscribe here in YouTube or to Daily Philosophy, daily-philosophy.com or dailyphilosophy.substack.com. Let me write them down here since we have it. dailyphilosophy.com or Daily Philosophy. Would be great if I could type, right? .substack.com. So here we are. These are the two places where you can find me for a regular newsletter every week, or all the articles you find in a magazine style in dailyphilosophy.com. So thank you and see you again soon. Bye bye.